lots of great books out there written by the good, the bad, the beautiful, the brilliant, about what it takes to build a great leadership team, to build a unicorn company. The purpose of this session is to talk to you about, I suppose, our experience working with the founders, funders, entrepreneurs, leading hundreds of businesses that we've worked with over the past couple of decades. This is our, I suppose, tales from the front line. This is our, I suppose, acknowledgement of the journeys that our founders have been on, and some of the lessons that we can hopefully take for that and that you can use in your businesses going forward.
Okay, so we're going to spend the first 20 to 25 minutes talking to you about some of the things that we think you need to be thinking about when you're building your boards and leadership teams. In fact, we've got 5 things to think about. And then I think it's really important that we make this as interactive as possible. So the next 20 to 25 minutes is going to be over to you. We want to be here now answering the questions that you are thinking about today and be as helpful as possible. But then at the end, what we want to do is offer you all the opportunity to have a confidential one-to-one conversation if you've got particular things that you don't want to share in the public forum, but are challenges that you're facing with your leadership team and board right now. And we're happy to set that up after this session.
So let's jump into it. TikTok style, 5 secrets to hiring the best boards and leadership teams. And the first point is, we call it scrutinize what the business really needs. This is all about look before you leap. The saying is, be slow to hire and fast to fire. But the most important thing here is to really take your time before making this decision about who to bring into the business. And it's at this early stage, I think, one of the things we're aware of, the entrepreneurs, the founders that we work with, one of their great strengths is the ability to make really quick, brave decisions. But when it comes to growing your leadership team, the first thing you should be doing is speaking to your network. You may think that you need a COO or a CMO, whatever that person might be, but go and have conversations with businesses, founders within your network. Go and talk to some people who've recently made a similar hire, or go and talk to some people who've recently made that move into a business, and really understand what you can learn from their experience. What are the things that they wish they knew then, what they know now, in terms of bringing in that new person into their leadership team?
And I think you need to ask yourself, is this a business problem that you are trying to solve, or is it a skill set problem, or is it a growth challenge, or is it a market challenge? Be really clear what the problem you're trying to solve is, and then think, do I need a leader? Is it somebody that is going to come and really set the strategy and move the business forward? Or actually, do I need a doer? Do I need to just hire a good manager at this point? And then I think there's the question about expert versus generalist. Your business will go through different life cycles, and there'll be sell-by dates, frankly, for some of the talent that you bring into your business. And there are moments, especially in the early days, if there are any startup founders amongst us today, where you're going to need wearers of many hats. You're going to need people that can turn their hand to anything. And then there are going to be key moments where you need a real subject matter expert. If you think about JD&Co, we're building across the whole of the leadership team. And for the last 4 or 5 months, lots of the conversations that we're having and lots of the projects that we're working on are about hiring a CFO. And so it's looking at the inflation rates, the interest rates, the supply chain challenges that we've got at the moment, funding runways, and they've thought, okay, the one person that I feel like we need to add to the leadership team right now is somebody that's going to shore up our finances and take us safely through to the next round of funding.
The other consideration, and actually going back a little bit to talking about level, when we touched on manager versus leader, but the other thing is thinking about moving in the other direction. So are you looking for someone to come into your C-suite, or is actually this something that would be better suited to bring someone onto the board? And we're going to talk later on about boards and how to hire those. But it might be that actually the person that you're looking for is someone to come and sit in on the board rather than your C-suite.
And I think the final thing to say is, don't think about a leader as that stereotypical full-time employee. That leader onto your C-suite could be somebody working part-time. It could be that you need a fractional leader, just a short, sharp shot of expertise for a certain period. So say it's a CMO, you need them to come in and do a rebrand, but then after that, most of the tasks actually are fairly mundane. So what you don't want to do is overhire as much as you underhire.
So, sorry, I was just noticing someone was having volume problems, so I was making sure that everyone could hear us okay. So listen, that's the first one. Really scrutinize what the business needs. Look before you leap. The second thing we talk about, and our second thing to bear in mind, is that good leadership teams are bad leadership teams.
I love an acronym. So why am I saying that you should all hire bad leadership teams? But for me, it's just a way of thinking about the three key components for me. And that's that you need to think bravely about this decision. You need to have a huge amount of self-awareness, and you need to hire really diverse leadership teams. And that's where the acronym comes from.
So the B for brave in this instance isn't about hiring mavericks, people who are going to be disrupting. This is about the group as a whole, and really ensuring that, I imagine going back to Joe's example of the CFO, you're not going to want somebody who's a brave CFO and someone who's going to be perhaps pushing things a little too far. So it means, in terms of the team as a whole, thinking and asking yourself, is the person coming in going to allow us as a team to be braver, to make those decisions, to push our ambition? Is that person, in terms of the team fit, going to be additive and allow us to go further, faster?
And then awareness, I can't see at the moment, maybe put in the chat channel how many founders we have here versus members of the leadership team and people professionals and everything else in between. But I think if you're a founder, I think you need to have a huge amount of awareness. You need to know what are your superpowers and what are your blind spots. And you need to understand what gives you energy and what sort of makes you go to sleep, so that you can make sure that you are focusing on the most important areas of your business, but you also have the awareness of how much it would help bringing somebody else into the company that could support you on the next part of your journey. And then the final thing is a really diverse leadership team. And when it comes to diversity, of course, I'm talking about really inclusive leadership teams and boards that really represent your customers and the world around us. And I don't think I need to share with anybody today some of the statistics around the way that diverse leadership teams outperform by a country mile to those that have got, all of the same type of person in there. But think as well about diversity in lots of senses. So it's diversity of thought, it's diversity of skill set, it's diversity of background. The last thing you want to do, and something actually I get concerned about if I get feedback from a client and they say, I can see them fitting in really well. It was really easy to talk to them, and they were just like me. You know, we chatted for ages about rugby, or we chatted for ages about the fact that we both are from the same area. What you want is loads of different perspectives to go into that melting pot to be able to build really great leadership teams. So we've done number 2, and I'm conscious that there might be some questions already. So I just wanted to sort of take a moment to make sure there's nothing in there that anybody is thinking about so far, because of course we can't see you, so we don't know if you're nodding away in agreement or you're disagreeing completely. But please feel free to share any questions in the chat.
So a quick question going on bad, it's B for brave, A is for awareness, and D is for diversity.
Right, okay, so on that, if we've answered everything so far, get a thumbs up, everybody's here and all good, great. So if we talk now about building your board, probably one of the most important things that you are going to do. And again, it pretty much touches on the first point. Please do not rush to build a board. In fact, if you look at Silicon Valley, their view is $10 million has got to be the turnover number before you even consider building a board. Certainly in the UK, I think you need to have 4 or 5 million at least revenue before you're putting a professional board into place. And I think 5 people on the board is absolute max. You want to be an agile board who is going to support the business, not going to hold it back with too much corporate governance too soon. Of course, that is very important, but just something to think about. And then when it comes to the stage of your business, if you think about the startups in the room, I've seen lots of cap tables where there can be upwards of 70 angel investors and friends and family who've all got little bits of equity and are real supporters of the business. And sometimes there's that temptation to give away those early board seats. And I would say, please, just think about the long term and the business strategy that you've got, because when the right moment comes, that important board member is going to unlock something really key.
Absolutely. And it is about thinking, what is the function, what is the purpose of bringing somebody onto our board? And one of the challenges that we give to the clients that we work with is asking them to be really clear about the strategic growth opportunity that appointing someone to a board is going to deliver against. It's that classic moment that when it's Dragon's Den season, you see week in, week out, but it's that thing, what is the problem that's bringing this person in is going to help us deliver against? Is it a particular channel? Is it going to help us get into retail? Is it around a different challenge within that business? Is it about unlocking talent? It could even be around funding as well.
Yeah, and if you've got 3 co-founders and you've hired your first NED early, and then you think about future funding, and maybe you're at that moment where you are going to look at venture capital investment, you're going to look at PE funding, if they're going to take a majority stake or they're going to be the lead investor, they're going to want to put somebody on the board as part of that deal. So you just want to make sure that you've got enough space. And for those first-time founders, I think having a chairperson can be really crucial. They can act as a mentor, they can keep you honest, honest. They can tell you that you're doing brilliantly, because it's a very lonely job, and sometimes you just need somebody else to cheerlead. But also they can give you their years and years of perspective, and all the battle scars that come along the way.
We've had a couple of questions in just on boards in particular. So let me read them out. So the first one, talking about the size of board. And so you said 5 people on the board max. Is that just exec, or does that include non-exec?
Yeah, I would say that you can have a senior leadership team, an SLT, lots of people love my acronyms, will call it. And those members of the leadership team don't necessarily sit on the board. So as you start to grow, I would see an org structure where you've got a small board of 5 people maximum, and you've got a senior team. And I would say the board is made up of some non-execs and some executives. And typically in an early stage business, it's 2 founders, 1 investor, 1 NED, and then you would move to getting a chair.
One further question just on this. If you have ambitions to grow, would a non-exec board not be useful to get the company up to 4 to 5 million, especially if you're a sole business owner?
Yeah, I think when you're a sole business owner, I think having a group of non-execs around you is something that would really help. But I would also challenge you to think about just building an advisory board. If I think about JD&Co and building this company over the last 10, 11 years, I've been really lucky to have friends of JD&Co. They are advisors to me as a sole founder, and they've certainly unlocked new revenue streams and new ways to grow. But I would just be careful about giving away too much equity too soon, and how you're going to remunerate those non-execs, and just make sure that they're really impactful. Hope that helps. There's no right answer, obviously. There are lots of foibles and caveats along the way.
A few more questions on boards in particular, but I'm just kind of conscious on time. Let's spend a couple more minutes. So broadly, explain the difference between a C-suite and a board. So you touched on the senior leadership team versus board and the kind of makeup, but how will that change over time as well?
I think that the board fundamentally have fiduciary responsibilities and are part of, they are company directors as well, or they are non-exec directors. And whereas the C-suite could be board directors and company directors, but they could just be the leadership team. And so I think it's all nuances, and every single board and every single leadership team that I've experienced is all you need, as you can imagine. And that's why I think we're going to finish this, go to some more questions, but really happy to talk to you about your unique business situation and what will be right for your unique moment in your journey, because it's all around timing. If you are already profitable and you've got a long runway, you're going to need a different type of board to one where, oh gosh, right, we need to get somebody on the board that's really high profile, that's going to actually enable us to get that next round of funding. So it just depends.
Let's move on to the next of our 5 secrets, the lessons to keep in mind. I'm going to hope
you realise, Simon, if we were on TikTok, that we'd have them all sort of pointing the 5.
Yeah.
But this is old school, I'm afraid.
It's more likely to be mobile than dropping in on a fishing line. So number 4. So thinking through the process, we've thought about who we're going to be bringing in. We've thought about what a good leadership team looks like. We've talked about board, and now let's assume number 4, we're at the point of deciding to hire someone and starting that interview process, what are the things to keep in mind? Because the interview process is an imperfect one, and I should certainly say, of all the different approaches that we've used, they all have challenges. I think perhaps the first thing to talk about is being really clear from the outset who the decision makers are. Often there will be a stakeholder, there'll be a, dare I say, hiring manager. But I think as the process evolves, and certainly as the interview continues, a CEO will then ask you to be, a founder CEO will be asking people to meet more of the team. But who's actually making the decision here? What type of consent or power of veto do people have? So really important to be aware and have those conversations in advance. The second thing just to be aware of is really what's going on in an interview. And I think all successful interview processes that we are involved in start with selling. We start with these two parties, with business owners, entrepreneurs, founders, selling and pitching their business to the great talent that they have in front of them. And of course, that talent presenting back. But I think it's really important to be mindful that that selling is going on. And at some point in the process, that needs to move to a slightly more open, honest, realistic conversation. So after you've started to drink the Kool-Aid together, make sure that before you make a decision, you're having that really rounded, realistic conversation and avoiding that scenario that unfortunately is all too common of people saying 2, 3, 4 months into a role, gosh, I wish I knew then what I know now.
Yeah, agreed. And I think on that point, it's really important to understand, are you bringing somebody in to set the strategy for you? Or are you in a position where you know the strategy, but you need somebody to execute it? And if you are looking for somebody to come in and actually set that strategy for you, don't ask them to basically solve your problems on the interview process. We see quite often clients thinking, well, we'll just ask them as part of the final stage presentation to just give us the strategy for how we open up in France and Germany, or how we launch a new product into the market, or how we pivot. You know, this is why you're hiring this person, and you can't expect them and you can't assess them on already knowing the answer. So be very clear on that. And then I think the final thing to say is you need to be a hell yes, otherwise it's a no. I sometimes spend ages with a client going backwards and forwards whether they're right, and you know, if in doubt there's no doubt. You know, you've got it's not going to work, and so you've got to make sure that you've gone through the process, and then you've gone out for lunch with them, you've gone out for dinner, and you've really gone, okay, play back to me what you think this role is all about and the journey that we're going on together, and just make sure you can really work together. It's going to be one of the closest working relationships that you're going to have, bringing in a board and a leadership team. You know, they're going to be in your life for the next 5-10 years, so make sure that you choose wisely.
So
any questions there before we go on?
Anything on interviews?
And we'll come back. I can see, Will, there's a question there which we'll cover at the end. So I think this is the fifth and final one. There's so much to say on this subject, and I hope you appreciate we're just giving you the headlines, and happy to follow up afterwards. But I think once you've really scrutinized whether the business really needs to hire, and you're exactly at that right moment in your journey, you need to set them up for success. And that can be in a practical way. Obviously, you need to make sure that they can access all of the tools and software and everything that you've set out, and that they are going to be able to make an impact. That's all a given. But I think what's important is the emotional setting them up for success. You as the founders have got to make sure that you are ready to hand over the reins, and you need to emotionally invest in that journey, and there needs to be trust. You need to talk to the entire business and be really clear in your communication about what those new members of the leadership team are there to do. It's really important. I know it's tough. I know as a founder, it's letting go of control. It's getting people to do things that maybe you actually did like doing, but there are people out there that are better at doing it than you are for your stage of journey and the next stage. So you have to let go.
It goes back to our bad leadership teams, the awareness. We often, I think brand is a classic one for us. When bringing in chief marketing officers, we often find a founder CEO who has a very strong opinion on the brand, and having the awareness and saying to your new hire when they're coming into the business, there are conversations I'll still want to be involved in. I'll have a point of view on this thing that's perhaps a passion area rather than a true centre of their experience and gravity, but making sure that you're handing things over and having that conversation is really important.
Then I think it's just wait for the end of the honeymoon period and understand it's going to come, and be ready for it, because there is always that moment where they come in and it's not a straight route through to successfully making an impact. There's always a dip. There's always a moment where you as the founders or owners are going to go, oh my goodness, I think I might have made the wrong decision. And at that time, you can take away all of that trust. You can backtrack on what you said in the interview process, or you can have the courage of your convictions that you have made the right hire, and you do all you can to support that person, and you're able to have an honest conversation with them because you've made the right hire in the first place.
So I think that was our bit. I think if we're going to go back, and hopefully 5 isn't too much to remember, but if there's one of these that we I think we keep front of mind, and certainly in terms of the conversations we're having with our clients, with entrepreneurs, with founders, it's that first one about scrutinizing what the business really needs.
It's where we do most of our work, actually, to spend most of our time. Almost at the moment when you've got a job spec, you're already halfway through the project, if that makes sense. There's so much to do, to push back on, to challenge, to hold the mirror, to make sure that every stakeholder, every investor, maybe your biggest client gets involved, everybody that could be impacted signs up for this. Or if you're making this decision as a lone founder, or you're taking the reins as CEO and making this decision, that you've done enough due diligence behind the scenes that you know that this is the right thing for the company. And sometimes it can even be letting one of those co-founders go. That happens quite often, but almost don't hire until you absolutely need to, and then go to market with a really clear objective about what you're looking for.
So I think at this point we're going to pause and take a look at some of the questions that have come in, and it looks as though talking about boards and NED appointments is where a lot of the questions
Correct.
are. At this point, actually, I think we might move on to full screen. Bear with me, because we'll take these 5 down.
There we are. We're back. I hope that was helpful. It's really difficult, as you can imagine. We're just talking to ourselves and we can't see any of your faces. So please do put any questions in.
So shall I read some of them that are coming through? So
yeah.
Staying with C-suite hires, we talked about being successful. There's a question here: what are your thoughts on probationary periods for C-suite hires?
Oh, tricky one. This is a real bugbear of mine. Do not use the probation period as an extended interview. You need to use all of that time to set them up for success. And whenever I hear anybody saying, well, you know, I'm not 100%, but I'm going to use the probation period to really test that they're okay. I think the second thing to say is probation periods these days in a modern working world, they don't really exist. So in some companies, they come and go and nobody even thinks about them. Typically, it's 3 months, but I think if you haven't got the trust in the C-suite that you're hiring, then don't make the decision, keep going, meet another 5 people before you make that decision.
I think the other thing also about probation periods is look at it from the other side and make sure that if you are trying to attract the best talent out there, if you're looking to take somebody out of an existing role that they are hopefully being very successful in, they're being incentivized to stay, if you're trying to bring them in, you need to be aware of the risks that you're asking them to take. So putting in short notice periods, we can get rid of you in a week in your probation period. If they are a senior leader, if they are comfortable, doing well, being incentivized, then opening them up to that risk could be a barrier to them joining the business.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually, Simon, because at this level, you don't, C-suite and boards are not necessarily applying to a job ad. They're very happy. They are waiting to get headhunted by people like us. So they're in high demand, the good ones, and short supply. And I've been through 3-4 recessions, and that statistic still bears true. The best talent is always in high demand and short supply, whatever the economic situation.
Yeah. Another question here: what is your view on getting the target to present their initial thoughts on their new role pre-taking them on? And we touched on this a little bit in terms of, be careful you're not asking somebody to solve the problem that you're looking to make with this hire during the process itself. But I think that idea of getting them to talk about their expectations of the role, what that role means in a business, is really important. But remember, or keep in mind, what information they have. So experience that they're bringing from prior roles is brilliant. Dig into that, ask them to talk about what they've learned in previous roles. But chances are they will have only spent 2, 3, 4 hours with your business by the time that you're asking them to present. So one of the things we in fact have a client who's asking candidates to present really early on, and they are being really clear that this is about their thoughts within an information vacuum. So be realistic about what you're asking them to give you insight on.
Shall I answer that one about certain qualities that seem to be generic to certain positions? I think that's obviously there's so much to say on that subject, but I would say when it comes to building your C-suite, almost your functional expertise is a given, and what I look for in addition to their functional expertise is attitude and great leadership, because when you're the best performing teams are people that are a leader across the business, but they happen to be the CFO, or they're a leader across the business, but they happen to be the chief people officer. And so it's about building a team that all have different skills. You've got introverts, you've got extroverts, you've got left brain thinking, you've got right brain thinking, you've got people that hopefully all didn't go to the same university, or even hopefully a couple of people in there from the School of Life as well. And so I think it's important to make sure that you're looking for those core leadership characteristics, but of course we can go into detail about specific skill sets that we think when it comes to a COO or when it comes to a chairperson we look for. And maybe we can do another session.
So a question here from Sarah in terms of actually thinking about things from the other side of the table. Any advice for the NED board advisor in the process as to what to look for when approached by founders to join their board?
Oh, that's a really good one, Sarah, and something I get asked all the time, actually, almost sort of with Imagine Our network over all these years, and they will sometimes ask us to get a reference or just get a real take on the founders. But I think if you're going to be an NED or a board advisor, I think you need to understand what is the specific area of the business that they need help unlocking, and is it a full-time role? Is it a board role? Is it something where you'll probably be impactful for the next 24 months? Board roles have a life cycle, and some of them aren't, as you can imagine, aren't forever. So I would say do your due diligence on the founders, make sure that they are very self-aware and want to let go or take advice. In terms of remuneration, I think it's important to think about things like, are you going to take sweat equity? Are you going to go on a daily rate? Are you going to put money in yourself? And depending on the answer to all of those, there are different ways of thinking about it, but hopefully that gives you a few pointers.
Just staying with a fairly short question about boards. How often does an advisory board meet?
Yes, I would say the best advisory boards that I have seen meet every other month, and it's short and sharp and impactful. I know businesses that are 10, 20 million revenue, and they insist on not having a board meeting for more than 2 hours every 8 weeks, because they just want to get on and run the business. And I think sometimes it depends, have you got that informal advisory board, or is it formal? If it's informal, sometimes a dinner once every 6-8 weeks can be as powerful as a more structured meeting. But I think it's your job as the founding team to make sure that you prepare for those meetings. If you've managed to get somebody who is a really successful serial entrepreneur to advise your business, you want to make sure that you always have put a lot of thought in before those meetings, so that you can hit them with the 3 most important business challenges that they're facing right now.
And actually, for a change from board, and perhaps it might be our final question, the question from Nicola, going back to diversity, and she says, I understand the diversity angle, but surely they need to have the same values as the team.
Oh gosh,
yeah, and I think when we're talking about kind of cultural fit and the dangers of hiring people who just share all the same views as you, views and experiences, all that side of things which we're looking to build diversity around is one thing, but values and belief systems absolutely need to be aligned. You're looking for people who are going to push and challenge you, but people who fundamentally share different values is a surefire recipe to creating tension and frustrations.
Yeah, and I think actually your business is solving a problem, and hopefully all the people that are joining your board or are joining your leadership team also want to help in solving that problem. And so you've probably shared and created, by the time that you're looking to hire a board and leadership team, some sort of mission statement. You pull together the 3 or 4 values. I really am not a fan of generic values. I think they need to be really personal and really impactful, and mean everything to you and your unique business. Otherwise, they're not worth doing, but hopefully you're so self-aware that you've articulated all of those, and then you talk to anybody that you're going to hire and make sure that you're all on the same page when it comes to things like that.
This is the pub test. This is the point in the process where you're no longer selling to each other. You're having a really meaningful conversation, going out over a pint or over a meal, or just sitting around the table, quietly talking about your perspective on not just the business, but the ecosystem, the world more broadly. Those are the conversations when it becomes about really what's important to the business, what's important to the individual, that you can get to those value side of things without it being a generic set of business values.
And I think you can answer or certainly allay a lot of your fears around that when you talk to them about all of their other business experience and work experience to that point. If you uncover that there is a role quite recently where they've left because they didn't agree with the strategy, or they didn't like the founder that they were working with, that's obviously where you're going to drill down and really make sure that you would have done the same thing in their shoes, and that you understand, or at least can relate to it, and that you aren't bringing in somebody that that you don't feel is aligned to your way of working. But also, I always think it's not culture fit, it's culture add. What are they going to add to the culture that you've already got? And I think that's just such a powerful thing, because if it's somebody who I say, oh yeah, they're just like, they've got our values, so they're fine, or they're just like us, so that they're fine. What are they going to bring to the party that is different and more meaningful, and is going to evolve your business further along than it is at the moment? And for the sort of level, the remuneration, the amount of equity that you're going to have to give away, you want to get this right. So spend time until it's a hell yes.
So I think, conscious of time, final thing is there have been a couple of people asking, someone saying, who should I email about potentially finding an MD for us? Somebody else asking, are we able to help with a chief growth officer? Absolutely. And so get in touch. I think email addresses will be shared, hopefully along with the presentation, but either email Joe or myself, get in touch via LinkedIn. And we're always happy to have those initial conversations and to really help you scrutinize what the business needs.
Yeah, 100%. And we love the entrepreneurial ecosystem. That's where we decided to focus our attention. And it's actually really helpful to us if we get to know your business way before you're hiring, because we can start to understand. And a lot of the time we're actually saying you don't need to hire yet, or this isn't the right moment, or we're giving you an assessment of the talent availability and the landscape, and saying actually if you're gonna hire that individual, this is a good moment to do it. So make sure that have those early conversations with us. We're happy to share feedback and insights.
And Chloe, I've seen, has dropped the office email, hello@JD&Co, jd&co.uk. My email, simon@jd&co.uk, and Joe is obviously Joe.
And of course, please let's make friends on social media. Happy to connect on LinkedIn and on Twitter, and take these conversations offline. I appreciate we've talked very generally and generically, but happy to sort of drill down. We're geeks and we love geeking out on this sort of stuff. So please feel free to reach out.
So I think we'll hand back to Chloe now.
Thank you both so much. I am just including both Simon and Joe's LinkedIn profiles in the chat if you'd like to connect with them. This session has been recorded and will be available on demand later on today. Everybody who has registered will receive a follow-up email with those details. Joe and Simon, thank you so much. It's been a brilliant 45 minutes, and thank you to everybody that has joined us this morning as well.
Thanks
Thank
so much.
you. Thanks ever so much. See you online.
Goodbye, everyone.